HK Motor Spares.
AHK Motor Spares?
Yes, better parts, better pricing every day. They stock spares for most passenger, taxi and light commercial vehicles.
And they open 7 days per week.
HK Motor Spares.
Quality spares at affordable prices. Visit a branch nearest to you.
This is a social program with Maulana Ebrahim Bham. Call 011 854 1548. Tweet at Ebrahim Bham.
This is the social program on Radio Islam International, and the book that we have been discussing on this program is Stop Worrying, Relax and Be Happy by Sheikh Muhammad Al-Ghazali. We've covered a number of topics, or the first few chapters of the book, and today the chapter that we look at, Maulana, is knowledge produced by action.
Yes, a very interesting topic, and I'll just read out the introduction, and sometimes I might need to do a little bit of make the introduction a little bit easy and give a commentary with regard to it. But let me read what Imam Ghazali, not the Imam Ghazali of Ihya al-Ulum, but Sheikh Muhammad al-Ghazali of recent times. He has said that in our studies we learned that one definition of knowledge is a development of awareness, theories, and faculties of reason that are concerned with consciousness. These theories refer to the laws, the principles, and the terms used by people of different trends and circumstances and backgrounds. The faculties required to the experience that the individual gains when acquiring knowledge of a particular science or all of methods of science produced by extensive awareness in the use of these theories. However, he goes on to say the established scholars are the ones who possess highest faculties in a people with a broad-based culture. They are a source for true understanding, judgment, education, and performance. Let us leave the field of theoretical knowledge and move to the field of morals, behavior, faith, and activity. To say religion is a complete course for progress and education. However, benefit from it is not attained by circulating its information amongst people, nor by memorizing its laws, nor by the formal performance of its obligatory acts of worship. So, right, that is now something that is done on the book, and it is on theory. Now, to simplify it, there are two types of knowledge. One is the knowledge of theories, one is the knowledge of information, right? And one is the knowledge of transformation. One is the knowledge of knowing the theories, knowing the masail, knowing that 5 times daily salat is faraz, and knowing that fasting in the month of Ramadan is compulsory and farad, and knowing that it's important and it is essential and is obligatory for us to inculcate ourselves with good qualities, like different types of good qualities, like good akhlaq, good conduct, gratitude to Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, reliance upon Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, staying away from vile attributes, from attributes that Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam has condemned and prohibited, like pride, greed, jealousy, backbiting. One is to know the definition of backbiting. One is to know the definition of pride. One is to know the definition of jealousy. And that is one type of knowledge which the author, Sheikh Muhammad Al-Ghazali, has made mention of theories and definition of knowledge. And one is the knowledge of putting it into practice. And there is no doubt whatsoever, there is what we say in Urdu, Zameen Asman Farak. There is a difference between the earth and the heavens, between these two types of knowledge. One is a theoretical aspect. And the theoretical aspect is relatively easy. There is no juhad, there is no effort, and there is no sacrifice in doing those type of different types of knowledge, knowing the definition. We all know the definition of backbiting. Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was asked, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam asked the Sahaba, Atadruna mal ghiba? Do you know what is ghiba? And they said, Allah and His Rasul knows best. And Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, Dhikraka akhaka bima yakrah. To relate something about your Muslim brother or your sister, Muslim brother, sister, and your Muslim, something in his absence that if he comes to know that you said that thing about him, he would dislike it. And Sahaba said, Ya Rasulullah, but what if it is true? Nabi Karim Sallallahu said, if it is true, it is backbiting. If it is false, it is slander, which is even worse than backbiting. So now we all know the definition. But that definition doesn't make us practice upon it. And we can't stay away from the harms, the spiritual harms of backbiting by knowing the definition. We won't get the reward of staying away from backbiting by knowing the definition. We will only get the rewards of staying away from backbiting and the rewards of it and staying away from its harm when we put it into practice. And that is what is meant by the title of the book, Knowledge Produced by Action. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to be able to practice.
And that's the important thing, that when a person learns something, when a person has some sort of knowledge, and then the most important thing is that a person practices on that knowledge. That just knowing something and not practicing upon it, especially when it comes to the laws of Sharia and so on, and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the importance of all of that there, so that a person can bring some change and practice on it. More in terms of interaction, this program is always good to hear the listeners' thoughts and their views on the topic. What type of interaction should we expect from them?
Well, I think the main important thing is how did you practice upon your knowledge? You know, it's an important thing. Our ulama have made mention with regard to knowledge and in terms of the practice in a very, very amazing way. They have made mention and said that sometimes a little bit of knowledge with practice is better than a lot of knowledge without practice. So how did people put that into practice is something that we need to inshallah find out and see how we can do that inshallah. So I think that's what we're looking for.
Right. So drop us a message on that WhatsApp number, or you can give us a call as well. Our lines are open if you'd like to give us a call on 011-854-1548. Ma, you can continue.
You see, one of the important things is that we need to understand that all our efforts, religious or worldly, throughout our life revolves around two important conditions and principles. So let me put it again. All our efforts, religious or worldly, even with regard to worldly efforts, to earn a risk, to run a business, to do good in your profession, it revolves around two important conditions for success. One is knowledge and practice. If knowledge is like a seed, knowledge is like a seed. Action is like it's the fruit. So without knowledge, neither the demands of religion and what is required from you can be fulfilled. So if you are, for example, you are a medical doctor, without the necessary knowledge, you will not be able to fulfill that profession. You're an accountant. If you don't know what you are doing, you won't be able to fulfill the demands of your profession. On the other hand, without putting that knowledge into practice and action, one cannot achieve anything in the field of religion or that of the world. So all our efforts with regard to deen or dunya relies upon two conditions of success. One is knowing the theoretical aspects, which is the basis so that you can practice, because without knowledge you won't be able to practice. And the second thing would be to put it into practice. So everything revolves around these two things. The right action is inconceivable without knowledge. Without knowing the thing, you won't know what to do. And knowledge without appropriate action has very little benefit. So let me put it again. Right action without knowledge is not possible, is inconceivable. And knowledge without putting it into practice is not of much benefit. So we need both these two things. It's like, I can't say like it's like a car with two wheels, because you don't have a car with two wheels, but it's like a motorcycle with two wheels. You can't run with one wheel in a motorcycle or the bicycle. You need both the wheels. In a similar manner with regard to success in this world and the year after, and with dini knowledge and with regard to worldly things, you need both the knowledge, the theoretical aspect, and to put it into practice.
It's about having both those knowledge, that to have the theory and then to put it into practice as well. You can't just go with one of them. It's like a person who can read many books. You can study, I'm not sure what that learner's book is called, that people use for their driver's license, or the learner's driver.
Is it K43?
Or something,
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah.
They can study the whole time, but until they don't get in the car
Yeah.
and learn how to drive, you can ace all of those tests. You won't be able to go anywhere.
It's like looking at a recipe without cooking the recipe. So all these people show us all the love. Nowadays you go on TikTok and all, you see those lovely recipes, but after you don't put it into practice and cook it, what is it going to do?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And the same with any book that you read or any lecture that you listen to as well. It inspires you, but if it doesn't move you or you start practicing on it immediately, you lose that inspiration and that motivation as well.
Yeah, definitely, no doubt whatsoever. So the author, as we know, was inspired to write this book, this beautiful book, Stop Worrying, Relax and Be Happy, by first reading about Dale Carnegie's book. So he quotes something from him. And then, of course, what he has done in every chapter is that he writes from Dale Carnegie, and then, of course, he adds on from the example of the Sahaba and the Quranic ayats, which gives a better definition with regard to it. So he said in that book, George Bernard Shaw had said, if you teach a man anything, you will never learn. The teaching does not produce anything amazing in the individual. And then he goes on to say that Dale Carnegie justified this interpretation, saying, learning is an active process. We learn by doing. So one is, I'll give you an example. Maulana is such a beautiful example. Our Maulana Tariq Jamil Sahib gives this example. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant him more barakah in his age. I see he's in Turkey, and some of his clips with regard to the historical aspects in Turkey has been quite amazing to follow. And yesterday I was following some of his clips on Abu Ayyub Ansari radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and he went to the qabr of Uthman Ghazi, who was a founder of the Ottoman Empire. Very, very interesting. So he makes mention, he says that the difference between knowledge by theory and knowledge by action is like you tell a person, you must swim like this. You go into the water, and then you put your hand like this, and you put your hand like this, and you put your hand like that, then you will be able to swim. He said that man will never ever be able to swim until you don't throw him into the water, and you make him learn the art of swimming in the water. So really, the fact of all those beautiful precepts of Islam with regard to the akhlaq of Islam, the good attributes, the good moral conduct of Islam, staying away from the prohibited actions, it's not only by reading about the definition and reading about the warning and reading about the encouragement. It is only beneficial if you put it into practice. And I think that is what. And then he narrates one of the tabi'in say, we learn the traditions of the Prophet, we learn the Sunnah by implementing them. As the Mufti Shafi Sahib Rahmatullah Alayhi in Ma'riful Quran, in the very beginning, when he speaks about the different aspects of Quran, he says that Sahaba used to take long to learn ruku. And of course, not in memorizing. Every ruku and every ayat, they used to practice upon it, and then they used to go to the next ayat. So it took them long to read a surah, etc., because they ingrained it. So I think that's important, and maybe our listeners can help us with regard to how they have managed to do this type of things in terms of the different points that they have been able to bring about.
It's gone at 9:30. This is the social program on Radio Islam International. The topic we're speaking about, knowledge produced by action. That the knowledge that we have to practice upon it, that is now true knowledge. And that's when you learn, and that's when you are able to remember or practicing on the knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted you. Share your messages and your thoughts, 072-786-1548. Give us a call as well, 011-854-1548. It's time for, and we're going to cross over for our half-hourly headlines. On the other side of that, we will continue.
News headlines. A blitz of what's current on Radio Islam International.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. From the Durban studio of Radio Islam International, I'm Anisa Isak with your 9:30 news headlines. A study by Occupational Care South Africa reveals absenteeism costs the economy up to 16 billion rand annually. Sick notes account for 15% of daily absences. Dr. Temba Hadebe of Bonitas Medical Fund emphasized the link between employee health and productivity.
Those numbers definitely do make sense. And in fact, if a more sensitive tool were to be used, you may find that those numbers were actually quite higher. Statistics actually do tell us that absenteeism and also presenteeism in the workplace in South Africa cost the country more than 235 billion rand a year, which is almost about 4.5% of our GDP. So certainly those numbers are quite worrisome and astounding, and a lot has to be done to make sure that we bring those numbers down as soon as possible.
The Gaza peace talks in Doha, scheduled for Thursday, have been postponed to next week after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's meeting with US President Biden. A ceasefire deal was hinted at, and discussions are now focused on bridging differences between the US and Qatari officials. The talks will include officials from Egypt, the US, and Qatar. In international news, protests erupted outside Rochdale police station after a video showed a police officer kicking a man during an arrest at Manchester airport. Hundreds gathered chanting GMP, shame on you. The man and 3 others were arrested for assault in a fray. Greater Manchester police have referred the incident to the independent police watchdog, and 1 officer has been removed from active duty. The incident remains under investigation. Stay tuned for these and other stories making headlines on the hour. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Keep up with all the latest happenings on air and online. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Radio Islam.
This is a social program with Maulana Ebrahim Bham. Call 011 854 1548. Tweet at Ebrahim Bham.
This is the social program on Radio Islam International, and we are discussing the book Stop Worrying, Relax and Be Happy, knowledge produced by action. That's the topic this morning on the program. Well, there's a message that has come through saying that Iblis knows that Allah exists. Iblis knows there's heaven and hell. Iblis knows the prophets were sent. We know that Iblis believes that he knows this, but is he a believer? No. So it's not about what you know, it's about the lifestyle that you live. It's demonstrated in your lifestyle. Over 75 times in the Quran, we are reminded that Iman and Amal go hand in hand, saying I'm Muslim is not enough. It's a reality that needs to be lived.
Jazakallah so much for that. There's no doubt whatsoever. Our ulama have made mention of it. Mu'athanwi Rahmatullah had said Shaitan was the biggest alim, more knowledgeable than many of the alims, if not all the alims of today. Also a great abid. He made so much of ibadat that there was not one span on this earth in which Shaitan and Iblis didn't make sajda. Right? So he made sajda in length also. The thing is that he made sajda everywhere. But he wasn't someone who was an ashik. He wasn't someone who was a follower. He's not someone who submitted his desire to Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So very well put that to know something is not good enough. So he said, little knowledge with practice is better than much knowledge with no practice. And Allah Ta'ala has made mention of it, and the author has made mention of three important ayats, which I will just make mention. Yeah, the one is the last page of the 27th Surah Hadid. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullaha wa aminu bi rasuli yu'tikum kiflayn. O you who believe, fear Allah and believe in His messenger, and He will give you a double portion of His mercy, and He will give a light. يُؤْتِكُمْ كِفْلَيْنِ مِنْ رَحْمَتِهِ وَيَجْعَلْ لَكُمْ نُورًا, and He will give a light by which you should walk straight. وَيَجْعَلْ لَكُمْ نُورًا تَمْشُونَ بِهِ وَيَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ. So that light is not about knowing, it's about practicing. Then he gives another example of an ayat in the 9th juz of the Holy Quran. إِن تَتَّقُوا اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَكُمْ فُرْقَانًا. If you obey and fear Allah, He will grant you a criteria to judge between right and wrong, to make the right actions and stay away from the prohibited action. Then, of course, the very famous ayat that we read in the Nikah Khutbah, right, in the 22nd juz of the Holy Quran. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullaha wa qulu qawlan sadida. O people, fear Allah and say the right things. Say that and speak that which is correct. Yuslih lakum a'malakum. Allah will correct your amal. After you do actions, Allah will correct your amal. So this is very important, and how the author has put it, unused theoretical information resembles undigested food. Such a beautiful example. Unused theoretical information resembles undigested food. And that's the reality. Allah Ta'ala says, لِمَ تَقُولُونَ مَا لَا تَفْعَلُونَ. Why do you say that which you do not do? Or, why don't you practice upon what you say? It's important that you do so. So, this is something soldiers and students in the military institutes receive their theoretical trainings and then they do practical exercises. So you see from time to time you hear that the country's military or the country's naval are doing naval exercises, right? Why do they do it if theory was good enough? So although they're not even in battle, they're already preparing naval exercises, because theory is the thing that counts most with regard to um, taking advantage of beneficial concepts and theories.
And the same would be said about those that are studying medicine and anything that you basically study. It's only once you practically do it that a person gets that experience and you're able to practice on that knowledge.
Yes, definitely. Also, like for example, in marriage, you can talk so much about the responsibility of marriage and this and that. Until you don't get into it, you won't know what actually it is to make sabr upon when the wife tells you something, or the wife making sabr when the husband tells. Well, a lot of things that have good akhlaq. One of the things that I found very, very amazing, and I must tell you that I sometimes think, Ya Allah, how am I going to practice upon this? So Mufti Taqi Sahib Rahmatullah Madazilul Ali writes that when Dr. Abdullah Sahib passed away, then his wife, after some time after the iddat etc., came home. So the family people told her that to say something about Dr. Abdullah Sahib. He was such a great scholar, such a great buzruk, Khalifa of Tanwir Rahmatullah Ali. Tell us something about him. So they said something. They said, Dr. Sahib ne हमारे निकाह में, the wife said, निकाह में कभी लहजे बदल कर बात नहीं की. That he never changed his tone when speaking to us. Now, that is something that is absolutely phenomenal. You salute the man for that. He never changed his tone when speaking to his wife. That means he never raised his voice when speaking to his wife. Now, I can guarantee in today's time, I don't think anyone can get that particular quality, but it's a quality worth aspiring to. That even when you speak, you don't raise your voice. Your tone right through the marriage is one. Well, I don't know if you can come out to that challenge. It's absolutely amazing. But I mean, that is our Buzurgan Deen. These are some of the concepts of the ulama, that is how they practice. And even with our beloved Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, nowhere in the hadith is it made mention that Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam lifted his hands upon any wife, any child, any student, any sahabi. Never ever. Even with his wives, there isn't like that he shouted or he screamed at them. Never. So that is the way. I mean, so now how are you going to get that theory? Now, if someone tells you in theory, now you have to do this, you say, no, I'll be able to do it. It's very easy. Let's get married and then show me how you're going to do it. Then the practical thing comes for you to put it into practice.
Yeah, it's all about the practice. It's all about getting and living according to that knowledge that you have learned in every aspect of your life, whether it's in marriage, whether it's your salah, whether it's the knowledge that you read in, the books that you read as well. And you gain lots of knowledge, but until you do not bring it into practice, that's the end, the main goal and the purpose of acquiring knowledge.
Yes, definitely. And there are so many different examples with this, that if you're ordered to do a good deed, then do it first. The author says, in the field of education, it is normal for the perceptions of knowledge to develop to completion at a society and mental level. It is not acceptable for anyone to be content with the speeches or interpretation, no matter how important they may be. Fiqh is important, but that importance does not be of any benefit until you put it into practice. Aqimus Salat is very important. Like when to learn to practice, Salat starts with initial lessons. But it's only beneficial, you only gain the reward and the benefit. Inna salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar. Salat prevents you from lewdness, from different types of evils. It only happens when you not learn the masail of Salat, You put it into practice and you read your 5 times daily salat. Otherwise, you can learn all the masail. When we were small and all, we used to do on Saturdays, we used to do practical salat. And it used to be the most difficult time of the week, because that time the Molanas also were in the element with the sticks and everything, so they make you see that you learn all the du'as. But if you don't put it into practice, that particular learning is not of benefit until you put it into practice. So the author writes, if you are ordered to do a good thing, do good deed, do it first. And if you are prohibited from touching evil things, be the first to get away from it. And then endeavor to keep those orders and prohibitions as an example for society, having enjoining good and prohibiting evil as the main objective. Desire for one's perfection leads to positive talk of this. Yet those who long for it would be content to just mention a few detail about his methods and leave the matter without taking any effective action. The way sweet hope dies in the mind of the idle minds. The way to benefit from all beautiful concepts is to put it into practice. Otherwise, it remains something that is in the menu without you tasting it. It's not going to be of benefit. So it's all the beautiful recipes that you get without putting it into practice, or something that in the menu without you tasting it. Allah Ta'ala dislikes this type of behavior because it is close to pretension, because its people show negligence while they are aware of the right path. And then he quotes the ayat, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu lima taquluna ma la taf'alun kabura maqtan inda Allahi an taqulu ma la taf'alun. 28th surah of the Holy Quran, Surah As-Saf, verse 2 and 3. O you who believe, why do you say that which you do not do? Most hateful it is in the sight of Allah that you say that which you do not do. If every good will individual advance from the level of theoretical concept to one of practice, we would have avoided half of our troubles and discomfort. Can you imagine? So instead of saying that we must not, knowing the definition of backbiting, if we don't backbite, if together with what Allah Ta'ala in the Holy Quran said, stay away from suspicion, not only that we knew the ayat, but we also stayed away from suspicion. And staying away from backbiting, we not only knew the definition, staying away from mocking and looking down upon others, we not only knew the relevant ayat, but we also put it into practice. The world would become a better place to live in if we put into practice the beautiful theoretical concepts of akhlaq and conduct which Allah and the Rasul has mentioned.
Another message that has come through your Muaz saying that I've learned ilm from madrasas, from books, but I found that spending time with pious people, or even those that are practicing this, is extremely beneficial. That's when you notice how they'd implement knowledge practically, and then found it easy to implement in our lives as well.
Definitely, Allah Ta'ala in the Quran says, Ittaqullah wa kunu ma'as sadiqin. Fear Allah Ta'ala and be with the people who are sadiqin, people who are truthful in their speech and in their actions, and there is no contradiction between their speech and their actions. So the ulama say that Allah Ta'ala says, Ittaqullah, fear Allah, and the way to fear Allah Ta'ala is to be in the company of pious people, because that makes a very big difference.
Jazakumullah for that. Continue to send through your messages 0727861548. And of course, our lines are open. Our lines are open if you'd like to call and share your thoughts live on the program. The topic that we're discussing, knowledge produced by action, from the book Stop, Worry and Relax and Be Happy. You can interact with us that way as well.
Yes, Mana. Now, the next 2 pages in the stuff, the author has given an example of Leon Shimkin, a businessman, in his own words, describing the techniques he used to dispel his business worries. He said, I immediately stopped the procedure, that I've been using in my conferences for 50 years. He said, most of the time, in the conferences, we used to discuss the concepts and what the problem, and then we used to have meetings with regard to the problem. I'm not going to go into it. He said, after a while, tempers would flare. We would often get clear of the subject, and at the end of the conference, no one would have written down all the various things we could do to attack the problem. There was no solution-orientated solutions to the problem. There was no method of dealing with the problem. It was only, one thing after the other, this theory, that theory, and we made so much of time and spent time and argument with regard to it. He said, now I stopped doing all of that. I ask and go back into solution. Tell me what we can do. I have become like that. I get very, very lack of patience with regard to long meetings. I can't take it. I normally come to meet. I say, listen, tell me what must we do? What can we do to resolve the problem? Don't come tell me all the problems. The problems are many. Tell me what can we do to resolve the problems.
Yeah, that's the important thing, and that finding those solutions. Otherwise, to write down and to list the problems, it can go on forever and ever. But to find people who are ready to look for solutions can become difficult.
Definitely, that's the thing, and then that's what we must do. Our beloved Nabi Karim sallallahu alaihi wasallam was like that, and there are many examples of it. I'll just give you one example, right, of Hajjatul Wida. So in Hajjatul Wida, Nabi Karim sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave the farewell sermon, right, and in the farewell sermon, Nabi Karim sallallahu alaihi wasallam abolished certain harmful and negative actions. So one of them was interest, and one of them was the blood money. So these were things that were ignorant concepts and ignorant practices that were from the time of Jahiliyyah, right? So what did our beloved Nabi Karim sallallahu alaihi wasallam do? Our beloved Nabi Karim sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't just abolish it. He didn't even tell the people, I'm abolishing riba. The first thing he did, he said, the first interest I abolish, the first riba I abolish is the riba that is owed to my uncle Abbas. Subhanallah. The first riba I abolish is the riba that is owed to my uncle. So yes, you can say riba is haram, to take and give is haram, right? But now you are taking, and now to say that it is haram to take. And what do? On that day, when you're making that announcement, you say the first riba I abolish is the one that is owed to my uncle. So he didn't only give a theoretical concept, he put it into practice. And someone who said, I read one riwayat and I heard from an alim that Abbas radiallahu anhu wasn't aware of it, that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was going to make this announcement. So he said, Ya Rasulullah, even the original amount I forgive. And then ulama say that because of this, because of his sacrifice, Allah Ta'ala gave his family rulership of the world for 500 years. The Abbasid Khilafat is the rulership of the family of Abbas. He made that sacrifice. Allah Ta'ala gave his family rulership and leadership for 500 years. So this is the benefit of, subhanallah, the benefit of practicing.
SubhanAllah. And even through practice, that's when you can really set an example, and a person wants to lead and teach people. It's sometimes set by doing that very action that you want people to do. There's a message here, Moaz, saying that I'm so grateful for the madrasa that I attend. I'm a student now for about 7 years, and even though I'm an adult, Dini knowledge is so important and so beautiful to learn. Even if it's repeated as a reminder to be better Muslims, and it's best for our akhirah. It's just good to be a student of Deen. Maraf, the next one says, personally for me, sitting and reading your Quran and du'as and salah, this gives me peace, and always focused on your actions. And the one thing that they just mentioned, that we should always think before we speak or say anything.
MashaAllah. Jazakallah. Now, on the book here, he spoke about this, Leon Shimkan, saying that we should have conferences. What is the problem? What is the cause of the problem? What are all the possible solutions of the problem? And what solution do you suggest? So he said we used to do workshops on these 4 things. Like, what is the problem? What is the cause of the problem? What are the possible solutions of the problem? What solution do you suggest? Right? And he said we used to go into these conferences worrying about a situation and going around in circles without ever anyone thinking through all the possible solutions and writing them down. This is the solution I recommend, and without anyone coming to an agreement with regard to the solution. He said, now my associates rarely come to me now with problems, because they have discovered that in order to answer these 4 questions, they have to get all the facts and think their problems through. And after they have done that, they have found in 3/4 of the cases, they don't have to consult me at all, because the proper solution has popped out like a piece of bread coming out of an electric toaster. Even in those cases where consultation is necessary, the discussion takes about 1/3 of the time formally required, because it proceeds along an orderly, logical path to a reasoned conclusion. Much less time is now consumed in worrying and talking about what is wrong, And a lot more action is obtained by putting those things right. So that is what we need to be doing, to become solution orientated rather than become problem orientated, which is part and parcel of perhaps what is happening wrong in our world, in our community, in our society, and our organizations. Start worrying more about solutions rather than problems. If you talk about all the problems will never cease. You will have more problems. If you start talking about solutions, solutions will come. Even with regard to domestic disputes, stop talking about the problems, start talking about solutions, and inshallah, you will see what difference there is.
That's actually a very good principle that they have in these 4 questions.
Yeah.
You'll be able to tackle any problem
Yeah.
in your life, that knowing what the problem, what caused the problem, and then, of course,
The
immediately
solution and
moving
what
on.
possible solutions to implement.
And what solutions should you implement? It
Yeah.
would just, and like he says here, that they spend now less than 1/3 of the time in meetings and conferences, and they were able to find solutions. And in the end, that's what we all want, is to find solutions to the problems.
Okay.
Chima, I can
Okay,
continue.
and I think that's the thing that we must do. I mean, it's important. I'll give you another example from the Holy Quran with regard to knowledge produced by action. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Holy Quran says, "Min al-mu'minina rijalun sadaqu ma ahadullah alayh." Amongst the believers, there are people who have fulfilled the covenant they made with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Min al-mu'minina rijalun sadaqu ma ahadullah alayh. Right? So Allah Ta'ala makes mention and speaks highly about the people who have put into practice with regard to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has obligated upon them, what Allah has made obligatory upon them. So this is very interesting. So Musab bin Umair radiallahu ta'ala was a Sahabi. He was a very wealthy Sahabi. He was one of the most well-dressed Sahaba amongst the young Sahaba of Makkah. This is people used to know that Musab bin Umair crossed and came past this road because of the perfume that used to linger after he had left the road. This was Musab bin Umair radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And he used to wear two pairs of clothes a day. That time when people were not so much into grooming or wearing the best of clothes and appearances. And then when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted him hidayat, he changed his whole life. And his family and his mother, etc., they deprived him of all those worldly luxuries. But once he gained hidayat and he gained iman, that sweetness of iman was more than sufficient for him to repel or not worry about all the other luxuries. And when he gave his life and he became shaheed in the battle of Uhud, then there was not enough cloth and kafan to cover his body. When they covered his head, the feet became uncovered. They covered the feet, the head became uncovered. Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, cover his face and then cover his legs with the leaves of the tree. And then when Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was burying him, Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam recited this ayat, Min al-mu'minina rijalun sadaqu ma ahadullah alayh. Amongst the believers, there are people who have affirmed and have carried out and were truthful about the commitments they have made to Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ قَضَى نَحْبَهُ وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَنْتَظِرُ. Some of them have passed on and they have reached Allah ta'ala and they have been successful because they have fulfilled the covenant with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And some of them who are on the same path, they are waiting for the paradise and the rewards from Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Subhanallah, what a beautiful way.
What a beautiful. Ma, that brings us to the end of the program. If Ma wants to add anything on this, just a few minutes left.
No, I think this is important. Allah Ta'ala in the Holy Quran says, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء. Now this is a very amazing definition of ilm and knowledge. Normally we will define knowledge in the dini sense by someone being a Shaykh al-Hadith, a Shaykh al-Tafsir, or someone who has become an alim, graduated from a Darul Uloom. And sometimes from the worldly sense, we will say someone who has got an MA or a PhD, then he is someone who is knowledgeable. But look at how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has defined knowledge. إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء. The ulama are those who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The one who does not fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not an alim in the true sense of the word. So I think this is important for us to realize that ilm and knowledge is not about theoretical concepts, but ilm and knowledge in reality is about putting into practice. And that is what the theme of this verse and this chapter was. And may Allah Ta'ala make us amongst those who are amilin, those who practice upon what Allah Ta'ala has made compulsory upon us.
That brings us to the end of the program this morning. Jazakumullah khairan to Maulana for joining us here in studio, and we hope it's more often, inshallah. We've got an ad break that we'll take, and that will take you into the 10 a.m. news bulletin, inshallah. Until next time, from all of us here, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Discover a world of financial wisdom. From centuries-old traditions to modern wealth, our innovative Sharia banking offerings ensure you can grow